welcome to the local campaign. Our debate today is in the riding of Orléans. We'll introduce the candidates to you in just a moment, but I'll quickly explain how the debate is going to work. We're going to have opening statements of 1 minute in length from each of the candidates. The order for those opening statements was drawn at random before we began our telecast. And then we'll move into a series of debates about important topics in Orléans, in the National Capital Region, and right across the country. We'll start each debate with a question directed at one of the candidates. That candidate will have 60 seconds to reply to that question, and then we'll open it up to a few minutes of debate during which all the candidates can participate, can challenge each other, can offer their comments on that particular issue. When we come to the conclusion of that debate segment, we'll go back to the candidate to whom the question was directed, and that person will have 30 seconds to wrap up on the topic. We'll move through a number of different debate topics that way, and then we'll have some closing statements of 60 seconds each for the candidates in the reverse order of the opening statements. The candidates have not been told what the questions will be about, so they will be hearing the questions for the first time when I introduce them to each of them. So let's meet the candidates who are here for the debate in the riding of Orléans. First, the Liberal candidate, Andrew Leslie. Royal Galipeau is the Conservative candidate, and Nancy Tremblay is the NDP candidate. We also have in the riding of Orléans a Green Party candidate, Raphael Morin, but Raphael Morin was not available to join us for the debate. So let's get started with the 1 minute opening statements, and we'll begin with the Liberal candidate, Andrew Leslie. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mark. I spent 35 years in Canada's Armed Forces. Worked as a very senior officer then in National Defence Headquarters and other places around Canada and the world. Spent a year working for a very large corporation, so I've had experience running in small teams or very large ones. Family man, married to Karen, my lovely bride of 33 years. She's a teacher. 3 wonderful children, Alex, himself a veteran who was injured, Erica, who's still serving in the Armed Forces, and Pippa, who's an actress and a ballerina. I've been working full-time in the community for the last 2 and a little bit years. We've made about 110,000 attempts to knock on doors or contact people in that time, walked on just about every street in the riding with a magnificent team of hardworking volunteers. In terms of skill sets, I have experience in working cooperatively and with municipal, provincial, federal, and international organizations.
That's time. I'll have to stop you there. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much.
Next up is the Conservative candidate, Royal Galipeau. Go ahead. You have 1 minute.
Thank you, Mark. My name is Royal Galipeau, and I'm your servant in the House of Commons. My family's roots run for 6 generations in Orléans. I've served Orléans, Blackburn Hamlet, and Carlsbad Springs on the former Gloucester City Council and on the Regional Transportation and Works Policy Committee, and as a member of the East-West LRT Environmental Assessment Committee. For 3 years, I've been the federal interlocutor on Ottawa's light rail transit project and chair of the House Committee on Veterans Affairs. Others talk, I get things done. Orléans has benefited from large-scale investments for the future of our district, $1.8 billion for light rail construction, $100 million to clean up the Ottawa River. I'm the sponsor of the National Tree Day, and I protect the Greenbelt from encroachment. Orléans' identity is now its own. Parliament made it law. New high-tech businesses are springing up. Our neighbourhoods are growing. This service and action stem from my roots and my convictions.
Thank you very much. And finally, the NDP candidate, Nancy Tremblay. Go ahead.
My name is Nancy Tremblay. I'm 31 years old. I graduated from Trent University with a degree in biology. For the past 10 years, I have been working at Environment Canada as an environmental scientist specializing in pollution. I'm a businesswoman. I've capitalized on my passion for the equestrian sports by creating a small business in the riding, and that business creates jobs and stimulates the local economy. I married my high school sweetheart, and together we have a 4-year-old son and a 6-year-old daughter. I've created jobs here, and I identify with the people of Orléans. I am the NDP candidate for Orléans because I want to help build a better Orléans where we help each other out, have a sense of community, and work together to improve everyone's quality of life. The NDP platform accomplishes this. Orléans needs a member of parliament whose main focus is Orléans and has a proven track record in Orléans. An MP who can contribute significant expertise in the fight against global change. Folks, all politics is local. I'm local, and my skill set is forward-looking, creating
Okay.
jobs.
I'll have to stop you there.
right.
Thank you to all the candidates for your opening statements. We're going to go to a series of debates now on the big issues in Orleans and across the National Capital Region, as well across the country. And I'll begin with a question to Liberal candidate Andrew Leslie. You've talked about your background and your service to the country, and I'm sure Canadians are grateful for your service in the military. You don't live in the riding right now. Is that an issue? Can you effectively represent the people of Orleans if you don't live in their community?
I'm an East End, Ottawa boy. My children grew up in the East End. Of course, my father was a soldier, so we moved many times. And I believe that you have to look at the talents that one can bring to helping serve the citizens of the riding itself. I live in the same riding right now as Mr. Royal Galipeau, and I don't believe it's a negative. It has come up occasionally, to be fair and honest, but once people understand what the proposals we have for the riding and some of the platforms that are locally based, there seems to be quite a lot of acceptance and even enthusiasm. So I believe I'm a good candidate for the riding, and we'll let the electors decide.
Okay, we'll open it up to all of you now on this issue and just on representing the riding
Since my
in general.
name was mentioned, I've lived in the same house for the last 25 years or more. And the riding boundary has changed. I've always stayed in the same place. And by the way, when I moved, it was friends helping me to move, paying for pizza. And when it's over, I do my shopping in Orleans. I buy my car in Orleans. I live there, and I commute from Orleans all the time.
I think it's important to have someone who lives in the riding because an MP should represent the people that the basic demographics of who lives there. And I feel like I represent Orleans. I feel like I am, sorry.
I'm just encouraging you to look at the camera.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
sorry. So, you know, I fight against traffic each and every day, just like all of the people in Orleans. I don't go against the traffic coming into Orleans, you know, every day. It's important for people to be represented by someone who has their same values, has their same goals. And, you know, I'm a small business owner in Orleans. I am a mother of young children here. I pay childcare just like everyone else. I rush around, getting home, going back to work, picking up kids. I know what it's like to be someone who lives in Orleans, and I feel like I represent the people of Orleans the best.
I believe that through hard work and dedication, and you can gain a great deal of knowledge. As mentioned, my team and I have been at this solid for 2 years doing nothing else. Hundreds of thousands of attempts have been made to establish contact. We've had a wonderful rally here in Orleans with Mr. Trudeau last week where 1,400 dedicated supporters showed up, which I think is a record for the riding. And the fundraising is going very well, but more importantly than all of that is the ability to listen to the concerns of the citizenry and try to figure out how you're actually going to help them. And we have some great ideas, full of energy and enthusiasm, and I have a track record of actually getting things done.
I have a question. Mr. Leslie, you had an option to move to Orleans not that long ago. You had to move. Why didn't you move to Orleans?
At the time, I had not decided to enter federal politics. At the time that you make the choice for the final move, you're still serving. And of course, I don't think you want any of your generals or senior officers to have political affiliations at that time.
So you just decided in a short period of time that you wanted to be running it just
2
overnight?
2 years after retirement.
Maybe we can use this time to talk a little more about the role of MPs, and because there's been a lot of discussion about how the power of the individual MP has declined in recent times. What can be done to change that? What can be the role of a member of Parliament going forward? How would you try to change that in your role?
One of the things you must do when you're a member of Parliament is to be attentive. All candidates can say that they are, but the fact is, the one who's speaking now is the one who answers his own phone. And you know what? When a request comes in from the mayor for light rail transit, it doesn't take me more than 2 weeks to figure out what needs to be done because of the anticipation and because we've established the fiscal framework to get it done. And so that happens by listening, that happens by being there, that happens by answering your own phone.
Do you answer your own tweets as well?
No, actually, I'm not much of a tweeter.
I would say that it's time for a change on a variety of levels. So without casting stones, because we're all friends, there is one party which has earned a reputation for those members of its parliaments having very minimal influence and ability to actually affect the outcomes. So one of the big ideas is democratic reform. And the Liberal Party has put forward I think, some superb ideas on how we're going to streamline this, how to give more autonomy and authority to the individual MPs, make sure there's accountability between themselves and those who choose to elect them. So I think it's gotten to the point where you seem to have, in one party anyways, a cadre of non-elected officials who surround the Prime Minister in the Prime Minister's office, who exercise undue and, quite frankly, alarming authority.
I think that this is very interesting, except that there's the one party where we have more free votes is the party that I represent. We have more free votes because we have freedom of conscience, which is something that in the third party they're not allowed to do.
Well, sorry, I'm not quite sure what you're referring to, but having said that, we are free to express our
I'm
opinions.
referring to the fact that freedom of conscience is not allowed in the Liberal Party of Canada, and candidates that have certain views have been told that they're not welcome there. And certainly, on the floor of the House of Commons, nobody has more free votes than the party that I represent in the House of Commons.
Okay, we'll stop there. Andrew, Leslie, I asked you the question, so you get 30 seconds now to wrap up on this topic on your own.
I would urge the citizens of Orleans to judge the candidates based on what they've done, what they intend to do, and the organizations that they represent. The key is interaction with the local community figures, with the day-to-day voters on the streets. I and my team have been working extraordinarily hard over the last 2 years. Minus 31, 32 degrees centigrade weather, knocking on doors, mentioned 100,000 so far, going to all sorts of community events, as have my colleagues. But you're also looking at what it is that the people of Orleans want. And the Liberal Party is willing to invest in the future, invest in the people of Canada, and in this riding more so than ever before.
All right, we'll stop there. Thank you very much to all the candidates for your participation in that discussion. The next question is for Conservative candidate Royal Galipeau. And I want to talk about the Victims of Communism Memorial, which is not in Orleans, of course, but is in the National Capital Region. You were speaking earlier about how quickly you're able to respond to the mayor's request for funding for light rail, for example, that you've been responsive to the needs of your constituents. Has the government listened to the community on this issue? Because there are surveys that show that a majority of local residents don't want to see the Victims of Communism Memorial in the location that your government has approved.
Well, first of all, most people don't like monuments of any kind before they're built. But I've been interested in this particular monument from the start. And I worked to make sure that the scale would be respectable and that it would be in a location that would not be intrusive on the avenue that that we now know as Wellington Street. The parliamentary precinct, the Supreme Court, is going to be respected. The monument is going to be in a park-like setting, closer to the National Library and Archives than as being advertised in the newspapers, and it will be in a scale that I think people will find rather tasteful.
Okay, it's open to all of you on this. And I'd encourage you to direct your attention to the cameras again, rather than to me, because that's where the voters are.
You're the one with the magnetism.
I don't think anybody's really arguing against the idea of a monument to the victims of communism, because many hundreds of thousands, indeed millions, fell prey to such predations. It's a question of the process of being open and transparent, and essentially the dignity of the various offices involved. So 85% of the citizens of Ottawa, according to a recent sondage poll, are actually opposed to the current location, has been very public, the Supreme Court and most of its justices. It's a question of not following through on the process in terms of consulting all the various stakeholders. And a Liberal government will ensure that when there's such issues arise, all the stakeholders will be consulted in an open and transparent manner. And that's the key behind all this. It doesn't have to be secretive, doesn't have to be a small body of the unelected elite who try to decide these sorts of issues. It should go to a discussion where the citizenry are involved. And once again, it's not a question of the actual monument itself, though we could talk about the size, which Mr. Galipeau has referred to. I'm very glad to hear him say it won't be the same grandeur as perhaps the National War Memorial, which was one of the original proposals. But I do think that the process has to be revisited and has to be more open and transparent. So we are not, as a Liberal Party, in favor of the current site location, and we believe the process has to be restarted from scratch.
I would agree that we need to have a more open and transparent system when it comes to whoever is governing. You know, we want to ensure that we are communicating with provinces, with municipalities, with everyone, because we do more work when we don't work together. It's more effective to work together and stay on the same page.
The reason for which there's been a public discussion is that the issue has been in the public, and it's not a mistake. The NCC was discussing this as far back as September of 2013. The winning design was announced in December 2014. I'm an elected official. I've been involved. I've made sure that the scale was respectable, and I've made sure that the location also did not encroach on the dignity of the parliamentary precinct and the Supreme Court. This has all been in public, and some of it reported in the local newspapers. So we have listened, we have been attentive, but we will never, never back down from respecting the victims of communism in Korea, in Vietnam, in Eastern Europe, and elsewhere.
And Mr. Galipeau, no one is arguing that we should, but 85% of Ottawa's citizens believe that the current proposal has been rammed down the throat of a variety of special interest groups and stakeholders who were not adequately consulted, and 85% is is a very indicative number, and we have to listen to the electorate. And I would argue that over the last 8 years, 9 years, that has not been a particularly strong suit of one particular political party.
It is exactly because we have been attentive. It's exactly because I've had my ear to the ground that the scale and location is where it is now. You know what? We're having an argument now about something that we saw in the newspaper many months ago. What happened in the newspaper and what's going to happen on the ground is completely different. What's going to happen is of a respectable scale and of a respectable location. Why? Because we've listened and because I've acted.
Okay, that brings us to the end of that discussion, but I did ask you the question, Royal Galipeau, so you have another 30 seconds if you'd like it to speak about this issue.
Frankly, I think I've said what had to be said, but if anybody else wants to contact me about this, the number at the constituency office is 613-834-1800. Of course, if you want to talk politics, 613-830-8800. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you to all the candidates. Let's move to a question now for the NDP candidate, Nancy Tremblay. Your party is advocating reinstating door-to-door mail delivery for Canada Post. Given the economic pressures that Canada Post is facing and the role of technology and how mail delivery is changing and the fact that they're saying their business model can't support it, is that reasonable to ask them to do that? And where would the money come from to make that happen?
We need to reinstate door-to-door delivery, because what ends up happening is people who have, when you choose to pick a house, you say, I'm going to move to this location. If there's not door-to-door delivery, you're making that choice, you're making that decision to say, okay, I'm going to move to this house, I'm not going to have door-to-door delivery. But when you have door-to-door delivery your whole life, and say you're a senior, or you have mobility issues, or you have, that kind of an issue, how fair is it to say, okay, now you must travel to down the street on the ice, go pick out your box, go through the snowbank and try to get to your mail? It makes it so that certain people don't have access to their mail, and that's the basic necessity for some people. Not everybody's on social media, not everybody does internet banking, not everybody has internet receipts. So it's important that everybody has access to their mail, and so if you live in a spot where you have mail delivery, you should still have mail delivery.
Okay, it's open to all of you on this topic.
I believe that, once again, it's a function of a failed process. The last year, Canada Post generated profits of somewhere in the order of $200 million, so it's not a question necessarily of resources per se. The process as it's unfolded so far has been arbitrary and from the top down, with grave oversight, significant oversight by, of course, the federal government. And instead of having a consultative process with the affected stakeholders, organizations that represent the disadvantaged, the disabled, or the seniors, it's been a one-size-fits-all, a sort of a steamroller approach to actually getting it done. So a Liberal Party will immediately stop where we are now, engage in such a consultative process with all the implied stakeholders, and revisit what it is that we actually have to do to make sure that it's fair and it's balanced for Canadians. Keeping in mind that Canada Post is a vital national institution. It's got amongst the very best workers that we have around, and we have to do more to support them and to listen to their concerns, as well as to the affected public.
My NDP opponent speaks with conviction about this issue. My Liberal opponent thinks that we're dealing with the Post Office Department, but it's the party that he represents that closed down the Post Office Department and turned it into a Crown Corporation. A Crown Corporation is what it is, and it is what it is because the Liberals did it that way. Now, there's another issue. There are hundreds of millions of pieces of mail that are not being sent now because people have found other ways to communicate with each other. I've even received complaints about the decreasing Post Office, Canada Post service. I've received those complaints by email. Can you imagine? I use the mail service in Orléans. I use it intensively. And so I believe in the post office. But the fact is, a lot of people in Orléans have moved into houses that didn't have door-to-door delivery even before they built the house. So at one point, the Canada Post Corporation is making some rationalization. I only wish that more people were sending love letters to each other and paying their bills by check, by mail, and all that. And if we used more of it, then there would be more service. But we can't lose the post office. We can't lose Canada Post. And if we use less of it, obviously, it has to make decisions that will make sure that it can stay there for the long run.
Yes, but Mr. Galipeau, why are we cutting it at a time when it's actually generating positive cash flow to a significant degree? Why are we cutting it when we have greater percentages of our most vulnerable, our seniors, who can't or can no longer struggle through winter snows to reach the communal mailboxes?
I've discussed this with seniors, and the seniors that I deal with are getting the service in a very useful way. But the fact is, I think what you're recommending is that we go back on the Liberal decision and shut down the Canada Post Corporation as a Crown Corporation and go back to the Post Office Department, where we have a Minister of a Postmaster General who can run things. And if that's what you want to do, let us know.
Actually, Mr. Galipeau, I guess my point is, you're right, it was a Liberal decision back then which resulted in the establishment of Canada Post, which is now turning a profit. So why are you cutting back, scaling back on an institution
I'm not. The Canada Post Corporation is. And so, but if you want to turn it back into a post office department with a Postmaster General, you should. And then you'll have full control. But you can't say, we want a Crown Corporation at arm's length from politicians and say, oh, yeah, but you got to do what we're telling you to do.
Mr. Galipeau, your government has been extraordinarily effective at violating that arm's length sort of in standoff distance to make sure that your political influence is felt through this organization and a host of others. So for you to imply that Canada Post is not responding to government direction in terms of scaling back its operations, I think that's disingenuous.
I think that lending me intentions is disingenuous.
Okay, anything else on that? If not, we'll go back to you, Nancy Tremblay. You've got 30 seconds to wrap up on this topic.
So again, there's generations of people out there who will never be on smartphones, will never be on the internet, cannot turn on a computer. Those people who have door-to-door delivery now need to have access to their basic bills, their basic paychecks, whatever it may be. And so it's important to keep that door-to-door delivery right now and maintain it as is.
Okay, thank you. The next question is for Liberal candidate Andrew Leslie. I want to talk about job creation. All the parties are talking about creating jobs nationally, but let's bring that down to a local level in Orleans. The ratio of jobs to people, to residents, in the east end of the city is lower than it is in other parts of the National Capital Region. So what specifically would you do in Orleans to create jobs?
Well, quick bit of history. In the last 8 or 9 years, a variety of institutions, national institutions, federal departments have moved from the downtown core out to Canada. Very unfortunate, because that means those federal jobs are moving further away from Orleans. I'm referring specifically to the RCMP. Some postal assets have been moved out, RCMP smaller detachments, and of course we have the looming and impending move of Department of National Defense. Very unfortunate. In terms of job creation, I believe that one thing we can do as a community in Orleans is ask for a fair share. You can actually incorporate and create the conditions to get private corporations in there, great. But let's talk about a federal department, because there's several that are on the move from the downtown core, all predicated to go out west. So I would love to work cooperatively with my fellow colleagues on the Hill, should the citizens of Orleans choose to elect me, and of course provincial and municipal leaders, to make sure that we can get a federal department in Orleans. We've already got lots of government-owned land to do so it's a great match.
It's open to everyone now.
So what good is it to move one building or one department from downtown or from wherever to Orleans, and then have people traveling from Canada or from Gatineau or from Ottawa to Orleans? It's counterproductive. It doesn't make sense. What does make sense is, this is my vision. This is not something that, is we can't make promises in a sense, but this is my vision, is to have a multi-departmental satellite office where you have one building, it's secure, you have different groups, maybe Agriculture Canada, Environment Canada, Health Canada, different groups have different floors, different sections in that building. And if you live in Orleans, you go to the building that is closest to you, and that happens to be the building. That will, take people off the road. It will reduce the pollution from people traveling and make life balance a lot easier when you're not traveling through the downtown core every day. Another thing that would be great to create jobs in Orleans is an entrepreneur center, where people who want to start a small business, 78% of new jobs that are created from small businesses. So we need to help those people that, have a skill, have a talent. Maybe they like to make soap. Maybe they like to do fitness classes. Give them the tools to start their own small business so that they can then hire more people and create more jobs.
I would also offer that the idea of having a federal department, they're on the move anyways, it appears, and that's to decongest the center of the city. No argument with that overall context and plan. But there's a multiplier effect when you have relatively well-paid public servants who are now actually living, working in the riding, and Orleans dollars then stay in Orleans. And it's somewhere between 2 and 3. So a public service job will generate somewhere close to 1 or 2 others, those who are working hard in delivering foodstuffs, fast food, Tim Hortons, grocery stores. And by bringing in a federal department, you actually create jobs where lots of people in Orleans can actually live, work, play, and sleep in the same locations without having that long commute. Let's not just forget a bit of track history here. Over the last 9 years, 26,000 public servants have lost their jobs. That's a humongous number, of which many thousands live here in Orleans. As well, the NRC has had its scientific staff absolutely slashed with this muzzling of scientists and letting go of that scientific inquiry of which we used to be so famous. So when you combine all these effects and impacts, it's time for us to think about a flagship project to bring something big in terms of job creation into Orleans in the very short term. And because federal departments are on the move anyways, I would ask for a fair share.
Everyone has tried it.
I haven't interrupted this, but I suppose perhaps it's my turn. We've had Liberal candidates promise to move federal departments to Orleans for decades. But the truth is that the only government that ever did anything about moving jobs about Orleans is the government, the party that he represents, which in 1995 closed down LETI, the Land Engineering Test Establishment, an institution of 450 acres in Orleans, was closed by the Liberals. And the land is still there. Now, if there was one department, and not a single department has been moved from Orleans under my watch. If anything, CSEC was moved at our doorstep, an institution that that invested $880 million, and that over the next 35 years will the spin-off effects in Orleans will be $50 million a year. We have at our doorstep the National Research Council, now CSEC, CSIS, and you know what? This is attracting private sector firms, high-tech, small business, and cybersecurity, and people that do shop in Orleans, unlike my friend here from Rockcliffe. I don't know when's the last time he bought a car in Orleans or even a loaf of bread. Now, in terms of federal jobs, we've had some reassignments in the government. But the truth is that while the Liberal Party was in office 20 years ago, they cut over 40,000 jobs from the federal government. And under my watch, there are now exactly 10,354 new jobs here in Ottawa, federal jobs, high-paying jobs. And so, although there's been some discomfort and there's been some problems,
Mr. Galipeau,
but the truth is, there are now in Ottawa 10,354 new jobs.
Okay, I'm going to jump in, and Andrew, Leslie, you're going to get the final 30 seconds on
Sure.
this coming up. So Nancy Tremblay, why don't you take the remainder of this time?
Wouldn't it be great if we took advantage of the systems that we already have? The Treasury Board already has a system in place for teleworking agreement. Why don't we have more people spending more time working from home as opposed to, again, traveling through the downtown core, spending time in traffic, give people the opportunity to have better work-life balance, you know, do your laundry over your lunch hour or whatever it may be. It's better for people.
Okay. All right, we'll go back to Andrew. Leslie, you've got the final 30 seconds on
thank you. It's been many years since I bought a car, and I bought a loaf of bread this morning. You'd be glad to know, in Orleans. Having said all that, Mr. Galipeau has said in the past, if you want federal jobs in Orleans, vote Liberal. I agree with my distinguished colleague to 100%. It is something which we can talk about. It's something which we can work hard to achieve, but unless we try, we won't succeed. So I intend to try with your support.
Okay, thank you. Next question is to Conservative candidate Royal Galipeau. Let's talk about the National Capital Commission. Should the mayors of Ottawa and Gatineau have a seat on the NCC board as they're requesting?
I was a city councillor in the past, and I always found it frustrating dealing with the National Capital Commission. The truth is, the National Capital Commission doesn't have a local mandate, it has a national mandate. And it is a national commission with people appointed from across the country. And as a city councillor, I thought that they were not sufficiently in tune with the local needs, and this is how I dealt with it. Appointing on the National Capital Commission people who have local experience. Right now, we have a former mayor who is on the National Capital Commission, the former mayor of Cumberland, Brian Coburn. Previously, a former mayor of Ottawa.
Okay, we'll open it up to everybody now. You can keep going if you want, but it's open to everyone now.
Jacqueline Holtzman was on the board. So there has to be local representation, but I'm not sure that it's a good thing that the mayors per se, because the mayors have specifically a local interest, and the National Capital Commission's job is a national interest.
So instead of appointing someone, why not elect someone? Open it up, let the people choose a representative who will have their best interests at heart and can come in and at least know the issues, pay attention, and participate in the consultation processes.
There are various boards and commissions in the federal government, and the people who are elected are the people who are elected to Parliament. Those boards and commissions, even under NDP governments, get appointed by the government of the day. Under my watch, I made sure that people that have experience at being elected here on local councils are the ones that get appointed.
Sir, I agree with you that it's always good to include local representatives in dealing even on issues that are, if you would, purely a federal mandate. So the National Capital Commission has been quite rightly pointed out by Mr. Galipeau is a national responsibility. But each and every one of its decisions has an immediate impact, of course, on the cities of Ottawa and Gatineau. So the idea that the two mayors are articulating is that they would like to have representation on the board. And the Liberal Party believes that that's something that we're going to sit down and talk to them about. And as a matter of fact, I think it's a good idea. Now, what are the modalities? How is this going to work? What executive authority will actually still reside with the NCC? We don't know yet because we haven't sat down in an open and transparent manner and actually talked over these issues with a view to actually bringing the teams together. Instead, it almost seems to be a little bit of divide and conquer. I'm not saying that's such in the NCC case, but it's the whole idea of working cooperatively with the municipal, provincial, and federal levels to actually get it done.
The fact is that when the Liberals were in office, they didn't even do what I've done, which is to appoint to the National Capital Commission people that have municipal experience here in Ottawa and who can be in tune when municipal concerns are raised. We've had issues in Orleans. As a matter of fact, a lot of the NCC landmass is in Orleans in terms of the Green Belt. And I've worked hard to protect the integrity of the Green Belt from encroachment, from interprovincial bridges and other things. I've helped to arrange a proper entente between the city and the NCC so that there will be an exchange of land for that roundabout at Anderson Road and Renault Road that I guess you're using
Regularly.
and and so we're doing it, and we're doing it in a cooperative way. And what my Liberal opponent is suggesting, as well intended as it may be, during the 13 long years that they were in office, they did none of that.
Yes, sir. And now, going back through history can be a lot of fun, but as we look forward, we have to think of what we actually want to do, not yesterday, but tomorrow.
I'm doing it now.
So both mayors, both halves of the family have made this request. And it deserves to be considered, it deserves to be talked through, and I quite frankly see a lot of merit on it. I'm not sure who amongst the mayor's staff or the municipal council should actually represent, but I don't have enough experience, quite frankly, right now, and there's been not enough dialogue right now to judge what is the correct answer. So that's something that I think we can work out cooperatively.
Okay, anyone else on that? I asked you the question, Royal Galipeau, so you've got the final 30 seconds on this.
I don't think it's going to take 30 seconds. The question was an honest question, and the need is an honest need, and we have dealt with it. The National Capital Commission has a national mandate, but it has a national mandate that has a direct local impact. And because it has a direct local impact, it is important that members of the Commission have local experience. I've made sure that that local experience was made up of people that had had local elected office.
And it did take 30 seconds, as it turns out, which is okay. All right, let's move on to the next question, which I'll direct to Nancy Tremblay, the NDP candidate. Let's talk about balanced budgets and government spending and how the NDP and the other parties, when you get your turn, would achieve your fiscal plan. Your opponents are saying in order to achieve the spending that you're talking about in new areas, that you'd have to make a substantial number of cuts in other areas or increase taxes to achieve the balanced budget that you're promising. How will you actually get it done?
So you're right, we do plan to have a balanced budget. As a small business owner, I understand how important it is to be fiscally responsible. And yes, we're going to make investments. We're going to make investments in infrastructure, childcare, seniors. But the difference is that we're going to balance it with revenue growth. And so, you know, as a business owner, I don't sit there and go, I'm going to just spend without a plan to generate growth and bring in revenue. So I think it's really important to have a balanced budget, be fiscally responsible, and know your numbers.
Okay, it's open to everyone on this now.
I would point out that we've gone through a cycle of about 6 or 7 budget deficits so far, and we're now into a second recession under Mr. Harper's watch. First one international economic circumstances were such that that was really tough to resolve or even to attribute individual fault to. The second one, we're the only G7 nation to be in such a position in terms of another recession. Classic economic theory says that governments can cut their way out of a recession, or they can invest. And if you invest prudently into activities which will generate economic activities, for example, hard infrastructure, bridges, light rail, roads, dams, someone's got to do it, or the next generation is going to be burdened with this task. The second portion, we're proposing a $20 billion investment plan into that, starting not 5 or 6 or 7 years from now, but right away. The second infrastructure chunk is to social infrastructure, taking better care of our seniors, taking care of our veterans, making sure that our Aboriginal youth get the education that they need, making sure that we invest in job creation for the youth to the tune of several 100,000 positions with technical training thrown in, making sure that we can renovate those existing senior facilities, making sure that we can give supplements to the Canada Pension Plan, making sure that we can actually extend the helping hand to those members of society which need it most. So that's social infrastructure, and then we're proposing $20 billion in green infrastructure, just as the name implies. Our track record over the last while, quite frankly, I'm sure most Canadians would agree, has been anything but good. We may well be amongst the very last of the generations that still have time to fix it, and we can't wait. So that package of investments comes from a liberal belief that Canadians are worth investing in. And cutting as you enter into a recession is not a wise course, because you're then putting more people out of work. You're not taking care of your veterans. You're going to diminish your security infrastructure and resources. And by the way, those bridges, dams, and rail systems, they've got to be done. We have no choice.
You've already cut the billions of dollars that you promised to Indigenous communities only 45 days ago. You know, the thing is that your credit card is maxed out and there's nothing left on your line of credit. How do you plan to have this budget? How is this feasible?
Right now, the idea of borrowing $10 billion a year, when interest rates are at almost a historic low, setting up a national infrastructure bank to fund these 3 streams of national infrastructure, as I mentioned, hard infrastructure, roads, rail, bridge, social infrastructure, and green infrastructure, will cost the taxpayers at 0.075% of a $2 trillion economy. The positive spin-off is the creation of hundreds of thousands of well-paying jobs, a confident and determination that can actually look to a brighter future, because the Government of Canada is actually spending money on people who need it most. And by the way, we believe that the credit card application may be apt, but quite frankly, it's much akin to renovating your house. The time you do it is before the roof caves in. You don't do it afterwards.
So
you don't do it in the middle of a rainstorm.
Royal Galipeau hasn't had a chance in this segment.
Basically, what I
so go ahead.
noticed is that with all that verbiage, my Liberal opponent did not answer the question that his NDP opponent asked of him. But frankly, balancing the books is most important. We've had a global recession, during which time we made record investments in infrastructure, and we did it in cooperation with provinces, municipalities, and other public institutions. And we did it with 33 cents dollars and a full agreement of parties and governments all across the country. But now we need to balance the books. What the Liberals are offering with these $10 billion deficits for the next number of years, they're thinking about going back to the bad old years, and which really ended up meaning that they had to do cuts to social programs. They did savage cuts in 1995, and they did it to the transfers for health in provinces. From 1965 to 1995, the federal government was paying 50 cents on the dollar on health care. I did not interrupt you, so it's my turn. From 1965 to 1995, the federal government paid 50 cents on the dollar. In 1995, in one fell swoop, they had to cut it down to 14 cents on the dollar. And we have been struggling to bring it back to 28 cents where it is now. And frankly, we can't go back to that song.
Mr. Galipeau, history lessons are all well and good, but we have to look to the future. So
you want to go back to the credit card
just
days,
a brief
which in the
history
end
lesson.
will mean that you'll have to cut social programs.
Which prime
after
minister has added more to the national debt than any other? And of course, you know the answer. It's Mr. Harper.
You know also that we did it with infrastructure at a time where we needed to keep people that had two hands to work back to work with our infrastructure program. And we did it.
And we need to do it now.
We did it. Well, frankly, what we need to do, we cannot go back to the way they're doing things in Greece, in Portugal, in Ireland, and in other countries.
Mr. Harper is not a Greek.
Add with some extra time to this one, since
Mr. Harper's a proud Canadian, and he actually incurred $155 billion additional debt. And we're applying
and
the exact...
if we had applied your program back then, we would have spent more. We invested in infrastructure, and back then the Liberals were arguing we weren't doing enough.
I beg to differ, sir. I believe you're absolutely wrong in that statement. The point is, Liberals believe that the people of Canada are worth investing in. Prudent investments that will actually generate economic activity.
If the economy goes up to $2 trillion,
sir, you're interrupting me now. You're interrupting me now.
We did the prudent investments with the province of Ontario and with the city of Ottawa, with the Ottawa Hospital and many other institutions here. And you know what? You could go and ask them. We did it in consultation with them.
Okay, so I'll give 30 seconds to Andrew Leslie on this, and then we'll go back to you, Nancy Tremblay, because I asked you the question, yes. So you'll get the final 30 seconds. Okay. So go ahead, Andrew Leslie.
Thank you, Mark. Once again, Liberals believe that we should be investing in our people. We have to do things which, if we don't do them, who will? That's our federal bridges, our roads, our light rail systems, our dams, all of which have got to be done. So that's a $20 billion investment we're proposing for the infrastructure. The other $20 billion in social infrastructure, a very good idea that extends that helping hand to those who need it so well or so badly. And of course, green infrastructure. Bottom line of all of this is Canadians have a choice, a pretty stark one. They can either stick with the Harper plan, which is not working, or seek an alternative. Sorry.
Nancy Tremblay, you get 30 seconds now to wrap up on this topic. Go ahead.
How can you run deficits when economic forecasts are gloomy? Liberals talk about borrowing when the interest rates are good, but tell that to the World Bank, the IMF, and the OECD. You can't run a deficit with economic uncertainty.
Okay, thank you. Let's turn to Andrew Leslie, the Liberal candidate, for another question now. I want to talk about the federal public service. There are many public servants in Orleans, of course, and there are concerns about how they've been treated. The unions have raised questions. You raised the point earlier about scientists allegedly being muzzled by the current federal government. What would you do differently with regard to the federal public service, and would it be affordable, or would, because the risk is always that if you're working too closely with the federal public servants and giving them too much of what they want, then the costs are going up, the wages are increasing at too great a rate. So how do you strike the right balance between managing your employees responsibly, but at the same time not having them revolting against the government?
So we are entering into a recession. That's irrefutable. And Canadians have a choice to make. Do they want more cuts to the services that they receive? Do they want more people unemployed, which adds a greater societal burden, a debt, if you would, on the shoulders of all those remaining who still have their jobs? Or do you invest? 26,000 public servants, amongst the very finest in the world, have been laid off in the Ottawa region over the last 8 or 9 years. That has resulted in Canadians getting less of the services that they need. That's resulted in a greater burden being placed on the shoulders of those who remain. Ms. Tremblay herself, as a scientist, has had her staff, well, she can tell the story better than I, so I'll obviously let her do that, has had her staff diminished by 30, 40, 50%. And of course, we're trying to become a knowledge economy. We have to invest more in scientific research. We have to invest more in the public service. We have to make sure that arbitrary decisions made on sick days clawback, that is stopped, and it's reconsulted and renegotiated with all the stakeholders.
Okay, it's open to everyone now.
You go first.
Go ahead, okay. So Mr. Leslie's right. I have been working at Environment Canada for the last 10 years, and when I started working there, there was 40 of us. And when Stephen Harper came into power, we got cut down to about 15.
They kept the best 15.
They sure did, but but at the same time, those 15 people cannot do the amount of work that the 40 people were doing, and thus we have to make cuts. And we're making cuts to the environment. We're making cuts to, pollution programs that are looking out for water, land, water quality, air quality. These are important necessities to humans, to have a basic drinking quality water, having quality of air to breathe. These are important things, and making cuts in that type of way is detrimental. The thing is Canadian workers have waited long enough for a government that works for them, and we need to get the job done now. We need to ensure that we are consulting and working with unions as opposed to just saying, hey, we're going to take away your sick leave. Hey, we're going to do this, and you have no choice about it. We have unions for a reason. We pay these unions for a reason. So it's important to go back to the public service and having a strong public service, because Orleans has a great percentage of public servants that work here, and so a strong public service means a strong Orleans.
My Liberal opponent is throwing numbers around about people who've been laid off. I think that those numbers need to be questioned, because the truth of the matter is that it's under his administration that more than 40,000 civil servants were just cut. On my watch, we've increased the Ottawa workforce for the federal government by exactly 10,354. And while I'm talking about scientists, we have added more than $13 billion in new funding since 2006 into science, technology, and innovation in Canada. And the federal department and agencies produce more than 4,000 science publications each year. These are our scientists, active and working and writing into peer-reviewed magazines and learned publications.
I'll tell you
Health Canada.
Sorry.
Health Canada and the Public Health Agency have fielded over 3,000 media inquiries over the last year. You know what? That's quite a few each day. Nobody's getting muzzled.
I'll tell you how it really is. You know, when something happens to one person in particular, they brush it off as saying, "Oh, it was just a one-off. It was just me. That just one time," and then it happens to someone else. Oh, okay, that's weird. When your union goes and does a survey and asks everybody how they feel about muzzling of scientists, or have they experienced this, and has this happened to you, and the survey results come out and it's clear. Scientists are muzzled. It's not just your one-off. It's most people. It's 70% of people who feel like they cannot speak freely, who feel like they show the numbers, and these are the numbers, this is what it is, but it doesn't look good. It doesn't look good on the current government, so we can't show that. That's the reality. That's the reality of how it is right now. And I can tell you, I'm a scientist.
I'm told reliably that 4,400 scientists and scientific researchers in the Ottawa region have been cut over the last, well, as a matter of fact, since 2009. That obviously has an impact on the morale of those who remain. It also has an impact on the output and their productivity. The Liberal Party is proposing to establish a position of Chief Scientific Officer who will report directly to the Prime Minister and have access to the information.
More power to the Prime Minister's office.
This is not power, sir. This is actually relying on scientific advice and unmuzzling the scientists. There have been a plethora of articles and learned discussion papers by scientists who themselves have recently lost their jobs on this muzzling of the scientific community. It exists. It's real. Mrs. Tremblay has lived it. I don't doubt her word in the slightest. As a matter of fact, I think she's being very modest about it, and it's time for a change.
There are probably some people that don't like that they have to represent the government, but the fact is that in most departments, there's over 3,000 media inquiries every year. And so that happens. Scientists are not being muzzled. Okay. They just have to work within the time frames that they have been given to them.
Andrew, Leslie, I asked you the question, so you get the final 30 seconds on this.
I think it's indicative of a spirit which doesn't treat the public servants as being experts in their fields, and I think we have a current government which, quite frankly, would rather tell departments and public servants what to do instead of asking them for options. This whole idea of the scientific community being essentially decimated of the muzzling of our scientists, of the cutbacks, which are starting to have I would submit, a pretty important and damaging effect on quality of life, be it food inspection, rail inspection, and the like. Unacceptable.
I'll have to stop
I'm sorry.
there.
Thank you.
Thank you to all the candidates, and that brings us to the end of the debate portion of our telecast. We're now going to have the closing statements. Again, these will go in the reverse order of the opening statements. Each candidate will have 60 seconds, 1 minute, and we'll start with the NDP candidate, Nancy Tremblay. Go ahead.
You know, we're hearing a lot about a strategic vote in Orleans, and close to 70% of Canadians have turned their backs on Harper. The strategic vote we hear about is to vote Liberal, as to not split the vote. Of course, it's Liberals that make that argument. The arrogance. Aren't you sick of it? It's the same arrogance that Canadians rejected 10 years ago. It's the same arrogance that made Stephen Harper Prime Minister. Do you remember? Chrétien Martin and their band, they sponsored government so bad it made Stephen Harper look good in comparison. When Liberals talk about making change, they talk about changing carpets and curtains in minister's office. When we talk about change, we mean it. What do you get when you mix red and blue? Purple. 50 shades of purple. There is no change when you vote for the Liberals. It's just more of the same. You don't like Harper's cuts? Did you like Chrétien's cuts? Tired of Harper's scandals? How about the sponsorship scandal? Do you want to go there? Do you want more of the same? You want to complain about the same thing 4 years from now? Vote Liberal. If you want to make a strategic vote, vote for me.
Okay, thank you. Next up is Conservative candidate Royal Galipeau. Go ahead.
This election is one of leadership about the major issues that affect Orleans and the whole country. You have a choice. We can continue to manage the change that Orleans gave itself 9 short years ago. A change that's been good for our communities. Low taxes, a country that cares about the safety and security of its citizens, a balanced budget, and a place where business can thrive, where jobs are created, where property values are stable. You can choose someone who doesn't talk about the LRT, but gets it done, who is prepared to solve a fiscal framework to bring it to Orleans, who has invested to clean up the Ottawa River, who continues to protect the Greenbelt, who answers his own phone, who helps you when you need help. Or you can vote for another candidate, one who would demolish our economy, who doesn't even shop here, and who believes that fighting the so-called Islamic State is not important in Orleans. Let's vote for the leadership that's proven itself for a strong economy. Vote to manage the change that you gave yourself. Okay. I'm here, your servant, Royal Galipeau.
All right, thank you. Finally, Liberal candidate Andrew Leslie. Go ahead.
Thank you. A couple of pickups on that point. Mr. Galipeau, I know a little bit about fighting and counterinsurgency operations, so I dispute you on that one. But having said all that, Orleans is a magnificent community. It's growing, it's starting to flourish, but quite frankly, I think it needs a bit more. So I hope to offer my services to the citizens of Orleans. I will bring energy, passion, an ability to get things done, an ability to work cooperatively with the provincial, municipal, and federal departments in this region, with the National Capital, obviously, National Capital Commission as well. The energy and enthusiasm I would place entirely at your service. My family love Orleans. We have literally thousands of friends in the community, and I'm there working hard from 6:30 in the morning till often midnight. So I hope I can count on your support. The most important thing of all is please vote. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And thank you to all the candidates for participating in the debate.
Thank you, Mark.
And that brings us to the end of our debate for the riding of Orleans. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time on the local campaign.